Hi, welcome to Seaside Quilting Tutorials. My name is Terry, and today we're going to look at how to insert a card slot holder into a tote bag or a purse to make it handy. If you just don't want to have to carry around a lot of extra things, you can slip your cards in there and take that shopping with you. So let's take a look at how we're going to do that. Now, I personally like to have a double slot so that I can put two cards on each side. So I've cut this out 8 inches across by 15 inches down. And I've also cut out the interfacing to go on the back side of it, the same size. And I need one more piece for at the end for my backing. And this is cut out 8 inches wide by 5 inches, 8 inches in length and then 5 inches this way. Oh my goodness, I don't know what I'm doing today. So you're going to take your main piece and you're going to fold it over so that it's on the back side. And you're going to take your interfacing and you're going to check for the little bubbles on the bottom, and those bubbles are your glue, so you're going to put that right on there, and we're going to press that. Now I'm just using Shape Flex. It's very thin, but it will sturdy up your card slot. Just waiting for my iron to warm up. I'm going to lay a pressing cloth down over that very carefully so that I'm not moving my interfacing when I do it. And I'm going to spray my interfacing down just with some water. Just to dampen it a little bit. And then you're just going to set your iron down about 5 seconds or so each spot. And you don't want to iron, you just want to lift your iron and move it over and press. And this just takes a couple minutes to get it done. Now, I don't know if you saw my tutorial from yesterday for adding a zipper into a tote bag. If you haven't seen that one, I hope that you'll take a look for it. I think both are handy to have in a tote bag or a purse. Gives you a little extra storage to have the zipper in there, and then if you can have a card slot so that you can put the cards in that you would like. It just makes it a little more handy. And I'm just going to press this a little bit more just to make sure I got everything stuck. Usually once your pressing cloth is all dry, it's usually set pretty good. Now, it does take a couple of minutes after you've pressed this for the glue to harden a little bit, but we'll just lift it up and make sure that we got everything. Yep, it looks like it's set real good. So now we're going to take this over to the sewing machine. Our next step is to mark out our piece. So our first mark is going to be 4 1/4 inches from the top. So I'm just going to go down to the 4 1/4, and I'm going to make a little mark on this side. I'm going to do the same on the other side, so I can get myself a straight line. And I'm just using a Frixion pen to make my lines, removable by heat. So that's 4 1/4 there. From that line, we'll go down another 4 inches. And make our next line. Making sure I get my ruler lined up. And then my next line will be another 4 inches from there. Oh my goodness, I can't believe I did that. It's a good thing this has a little eraser on the back of it. Sorry about that. We all have moments. I forgot I'm on the back side of my piece. But hey, might as well see me make the mistakes. That should have been your front side that we were doing those measurements on. So let's go back and we'll just start over. Not a big deal. We'll make our mark at 4 1/4. Doesn't hurt to see it twice. And you line up your ruler and make your mark across for that 4 inches, making sure that your ruler is nice and straight. Okay, that's our first line. And we'll go down. So our first line was at 4 1/4. Our next line will be at 4 inches. And this only takes a couple minutes to get your lines on here. And you could use a water-soluble pen or even chalk, whatever you like best. So then your next line will be 4 inches again. Then we'll turn it over to the back. And our first measurement on the back is going to be 2 1/2 inches from the top going to ignore my other lines. Those will go away anyways when I iron this. So your first line is 2.5 inches on your back. And once you have your 2.5 inches, then you're going to go down 4 inches from there. Do that right. Yeah. And then 4 inches from there. And then I just mark my next 4 inches. Okay, so now you have all your markings. So now you're going to fold this all the way up. So I got my front side up. You're going to fold this all the way up until you get to that first line on the back side that was at 2.5 inches. You'll finger press that down. And I just use my tool to go across, whatever tool you use to help you press down, or you can even use your fingernail. That'll work just fine too. And when you're doing this, you just want to keep an eye out that you're keeping your edges straight and lined up. Let me see that I'm doing this properly so I don't mess you up. So now I'm just going to fold this down until I see my line on the front that was at that first 4 inches, and I'm going to line up my sides to make sure that I'm keeping them nice and straight. And that it's nice and straight on that line that I made. And you're just going to fold that across again. And I just take my tool and run that across. Then I'm going to fold this up again, pulling it up so the back side's up there so I can see my next fold on the back side. And line this up again. Give it a finger press, and I'll just go across it. Make sure I get a nice crease there. And then I'll just fold it back down once again. Now I'm back on the front side, and I'm going to fold on that next line on my front side. Give that a finger press, and I'll go across it again to flatten it out. Once again, I'm going to lift this up, and I'm going to look for my next line on the back side. Checking my sides to make sure that I'm keeping those straight. Give it a finger press and go over it with the tool. There we go. And then I'm looking for my last line on the front. And I'm wanting to make sure that I'm keeping my sides straight as I go. I'm going to go back over that. And the tool, and now I'm going to hold this together. Bring my mat over. Make sure I got this all lined up. Don't want it to be crooked when I go to press it. Okay. So now I'm just going to press this real good. Just set my seams. And I just hold the iron on there. Get that all pressed real well. And then holding both sides together so I don't lose my folds, I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to press the back side the same way. And I'm just going to lift and press. And this will help set my lines for me. Okay. So I'm going to hold on to both sides again. Take that off my mat. All right. Move the camera over here so you'll be able to see what I'm doing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a scant 1/4 inch. So a scant 1/4 inch is just a tick over from your 1/4 inch to the right. So if you had it set at 1/4 inch, now I'm using my 1/4 inch guide foot. I find it really handy. It makes it easier because I have the guide on the side and I can press the fabric up against it, and I know that I'm going to get a nice straight line. If you don't have that, you can easily just follow your 1/4 inch, and with your needle moved over, it's going to still do that scant 1/4 inch for you. Now, I'm also going to change my stitches to 2.0. I like to have smaller stitches when I'm trying to make something a little more stable, where you're going to be pulling cards in and out. I want to make sure that my stitching is nice and stable. So this top part up here, we don't want to sew onto that, so we're just going to flip that to the back for a minute. And we're going to sew a scant 1/4 inch across here. I'm going to put my needle down, make sure that my fabric is underneath my needle, and we'll just sew straight across there. Now, if you saw my tutorial yesterday, you would have seen that this is the fabric that I used for my pocket. I decided to use that for the card holder today. Now we're going to flip that underneath, and we're going to do our next line. And this just keeps our folds in place so that as we're pulling cards in and out, this won't get all mucked up. And we're just going to flip that underneath, and we'll do our next one, our next fold. Okay, so all of our folds are nicely done. We've pressed, we've done our stitching on each line, and now we have it back laying the way that we need it. So then, that extra piece that we cut, we're going to lay that face down on top of our other piece. And I can see that at the bottom of this, it's just a little bit off. See how this has gotten just a little tiny bit crooked? That's not a problem. I'm just going to take my mat and I'm going to lay this down on my mat. And I'm going to make sure that my there we go. And I'm just going to get this straight, and then I'm going to straighten out my bottom. And I'm making sure that my piece is lined up on both sides. And then I'm going to trim that so that it's straight on the bottom. I was just using scraps today for this project. I think I cut that just a little bit wonky. So now, this is the top part. And this is our bottom down here. And I'm just going to take a couple of pins. I want to leave about 3 inches open at the bottom, so I'm just putting these as a marker. That's the part that I'm going to leave open so that I'll be able to turn this. Actually, I'm going to move this pin in just a little bit more. There we go. Move this one just a little bit more this way. So when we start, we're going to sew a 1/4 inch all the way around, leaving that opening. So I'm just going to bring that to where I know that my needle is going to line up in there. Put my needle down. Whoops. I need to move this back to a 1/4 inch. There we go. So I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch, but right here I'm going to take 3/4 stitches forward and then reverse and then come back. So I reinforce that area so when I'm pulling this out and turning it, that I won't end up breaking these stitches. And just make sure that you have your pieces all together nicely. And you'll sew till you're at 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. And I can check that by pivoting and see I need to go at least another, at least another stitch. Okay, now I'm at 1/4 of an inch again. This fabric is a little bit stretchy. And you're going to do that all the way till you get to your marker. Whoop, I went just a little too far on that one. Back up a stitch. There we go. And then when I get to the marker, I'm going to stop and I'm going to do the reverse and forward again. Make sure that you don't sew over your pin. You don't want to hit it with your needle and break your needle. And I'm just going to pull that out now. Okay, and I'm going to reverse and go forward to secure those stitches. And then I'm going to trim up some little flyaways in my threads. And then you're going to take this and you're going to push it through that middle hole so that we can turn it. And you just do that gently. Just takes a minute to poke it through. I don't mind going a little bit slow when I'm turning things because I don't want to break those stitches from the opening. And I don't want to muck up my piece. So I just take my time, poke it through. And then once you get most of it through, you can start pulling it through a little bit better. And get that all turned around. And then whatever tool you use when you're turning pieces to get those corners out where they belong, go ahead and do that. I'm going to get this poked out with my fingers first. And then I'll take my little tool here. It's got a little pointy part on it. And you're not going to push hard up into those corners, but just gently poke them out so you get your point over on the corner. And do that on each one of your corners, poking it out. And I usually run it across my seam as well. I like to get my seam set as well, and I find that if you run your tool across while holding it with your fingers, it kind of helps set it. And then I just run my fingers across and finger press. Okay, get these last two corners poked out. There, one more. And then I'm going to along this seam as well. Get that kind of set. And down here. Okay. And I'm just going to finger press it on each side a little bit. And if you don't quite get a corner out, I just take a pin and I just poke it in and kind of ease that out to get my point. Mostly the bottom ones didn't come out the way that I wanted them to. There we go. I'm going to finger press across the bottom and each of the sides, like so. And then on that bottom part, you want to take that and you want to tuck it in to the 1/4 of an inch like you would have sewn it across for a seam. And you're just going to finger press this to keep that flat. Oops. I don't need that, but I do need my mat. Okay, and I'm going to start with the bottom and I'm going to press that so that where I tucked it in stays nice and closed. And I'm going to press to get these sides pressed down. And I'm going to take a card and I'm going to stick it in each one of the slots just to make sure that I got my pieces all set in there properly. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to fold this in half. Just keep your bottom piece folded, and I'm going to, tucked in there. And I'm going to fold this in half. And I'm just going to finger press it down. Just so that I can see where my fold is. And I'm going to stitch right along that fold line. So I'm going to switch over to a straight stitch for a minute. So I'm going to put my regular foot on and go back to a straight stitch, still keeping it 2.0 stitches. And I'm just going to line that fold up with the center red line on my foot. Actually, I'm going to do this from the back side for me just because I think once I get that under the light, I can't really see my line as well. So I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to line this up where I can see that fold line was. And the back side is going to be up against what you're attaching this to anyways. But this will go away when you press or when you wash the item. But I couldn't quite see my line, and I want to get a nice straight line because this is your divider between your pockets. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to follow that line with the center red line on my foot. Got that lined up. You want to make sure that your fabric is underneath where your needle's going to come down and hit it. You don't want it up here too far and start sewing, or you'll be sewing down into your machine and you won't be connecting with anything but your bobbin thread, and that will build up a knot at the end. Not quite lined up. There we go. Now I'm going to do a secure stitch here as well. I'm going to go forward 3-4 stitches, and I'm going to go backwards up to the end, and then go ahead and sew all the way down to the end. Just follow that line. And once I get to the end, I'm going to do another secure stitch. And cut my thread. Okay, so as you can see, your cards will nicely insert on this side and on that side. Hopefully. Hopefully I got that in the camera. So you got your card on this side, and you can easily fit your card on that side. Pretty nifty. Now you could use this as a little foldable piece, and if we hadn't already done our seams, we could have put a little piece in here. Sometimes I'll sew a piece of elastic, the end of it here and the end of it here, so that it can come over, and then it just makes a little pocket that you can stick your cards in and just shove in anywhere and take it with you. So if, as I was before, when I had this piece down on top of this piece, I would have just stuck my elastic over here and my elastic over there, and I would have already measured to make sure that my elastic, when I pulled it across, was just going to go over and stay flat. And that's how I make little card purses. Or also you could put a little piece of Velcro down here and here on your piece, and then it would just stick together and it would work perfectly fine. But this one, we're going to attach it. Now if I was to say on my tote bag I wanted this on the opposite side, this isn't pressed, but say I wanted it on the opposite side from my zipper, you would just decide on here where you want it. You would fold this piece in half, find your center. We've already found our center here by doing our stitching. You would figure how far down. I don't like a card holder to be up too high to the top. I want to make sure my cards aren't just going to fall out. But you also would not want it all the way to the bottom to where it hangs past where your lining is going to be, because that would be a problem. So you could just put this on here. Say you wanted to put it a little ways down, you could line it up like this. And you, when we sew this, of course I'm going to take my card out, we're going to sew a scant quarter of an inch. Just, we kind of want to get an edge stitching going around the 3 sides. And we're only going to do 3 sides. And actually, what I should have done was just sewed the middle. But we'll do that again. Since we're attaching it, I don't know what I was thinking. But when you attach it, and see, your bottom is still open, but that's fine, because when we go around and sew, that's going to seal that up. And we'll sew down the middle, but we won't sew up in here, because that will give us an extra pocket for each side, an extra slot. So that way we'll have 4 cards, you know, slots on each side. But however, I want to put mine on the same piece that I put my pocket. And I want mine to go just below my zipper, about Oh, I'm going to go approximately an inch down from my zipper. Now this is just how I like to do mine. You can do yours however you want. It could even come down lower. You could put it below where the pocket's going to be. I can feel the bottom of my pocket's right here. You could put it down that far. You would just measure from the top to where the end of your pocket is. Make your mark here, make your mark over here, make your line, and then line your top up with that. I want mine to be, let me see, I'm going to go by my stitching here. And I'm just going to set my card slot up so that it's approximately an inch below my stitching. And then I'm going to make a line there so I know where to line it up. Make sure I got that right. I like to double check my measurements before I do things. Obviously, sometimes I forget to check my sides, but I do like to check my measurements. Okay. So now I've got my line, which is my guide of where I'm going to be putting my piece. Now I don't want to sew it there right now because I've got my pocket underneath there, right here. So I'm just going to take my pocket and I'm going to fold it up out of my way, like so, and I'm going to take a couple pins and I'm going to pin that pocket so it's up out of my way. I don't want to accidentally mess up my pocket. Okay, so that's out of my way. Now I already have my fold from yesterday where I put the zipper in. So I'm going to use that same fold to guide my center, and I'm going to make sure that my top edges line up. And I'm just kind of taking a look-see. There we go. I'm going to put my 1/4 of an inch foot back in, my guide foot. And I'm going to put this back into 1/4 of an inch on my machine. But I'm going to tell my machine that now I'm sewing woven heavy, because on the sides it's going through the interfacing and it's going through the two seams being folded and these folds. So it's going to be thicker going through. And I'm going to turn my machine speed down. If you can't turn your machine speed down, just go a little slower, press on your presser foot a little easier. Let me see, make sure I got my machine set up. Now I have it in 1/4 of an inch, so my foot is over. It's matched up with the red line on my 1/4 inch guide. Now if you're not using a 1/4 inch guide foot, you would just stay in straight stitch with your regular foot, and you would use your guide on the 1/4 inch to guide across. And this is a little trickier because we're sewing up on here. So you just want to find where on your foot. Oh, let me see. I do have that other foot that shows. Here we go. So some machines come with a foot that looks like this. Let me get we'll use this. This will help it, I think, show up a little bit better. Some machines come with this. It's your 1/4 inch foot and your 1/4 of an inch. Let me see. I gotta take a look at this. It's been a while since I've used this. You would be in straight stitch. I don't want to take a stitch or I'll bust my needle, because this has just a single hole in the center because it knows when you're doing a 1/4 inch, and you just want to keep it in 1/4 of an inch, and then you would check where on your fabric would this line up for your 1/4 inch. So let me put this back in straight stitch so I don't make a boo-boo. I don't like to break needles. So I have this lined up. And as you can see, there's a lot of markings on this foot. My 1/4 of an inch would line up with the very edge of this foot here. So right on the very edge of this foot. So since we're going to be sewing it onto a piece of fabric, we're going to just keep our foot so it stays on the very edge, okay? And with this, you can't go into a scant 1/4 of an inch. You would just do your 1/4 of an inch stitch. And that would be totally fine. Your cards will just fit in a little bit snugger. If you want to do your scant 1/4 of an inch, you would use your regular foot that has the wider opening so that it can do a zigzag. And then you just check how that lines up with your 1/4 inch on here. And usually this will line up with just about the inside of here. So if I put my foot down, down, you can see that my fabric, let me make sure that's in there a little bit more so that you can see my fabric is lining up with the edge of this foot. So if I want to do a scant 1/4 of an inch with this, I would move my needle to the right a notch. And that just gives you a little extra room for your cards to go in. But the other way, they would stay in there nice, you know, they'll be a little more snug going in. And I'm just trying to show you some different options, because we all have different machines. Some people are using older featherweight machines. I even met people who still use treadle machines. We're all capable of getting different feet for our machines. But if you are capable of getting the 1/4 inch guide foot, I highly, highly recommend that you get one. Because you have a little guide right here on the edge for your fabric to run up against, and it keeps it nice and straight as it's going in. And I just feel so much better knowing that that is there. It's got not as wide of an opening as your regular foot, but it gives me enough room to go into my scant 1/4 inch. So now that I've changed all my feet around, I'm going to make sure that I get this lined back up. And I'm moving it over a notch. I want it to be 2.0 stitches because I want smaller stitches so that I know that this is going to be stitched on here really well. So I'm going to line this back up. I want my center stitching to be on that fold down the center of my fabric. And I want to make sure that my piece is going straight across on my line. And if you check the bottom as well, down here, to make sure that it's lined up with your center fold and the top both, usually that tells you that it's straight. But I like to have my line as well, just to double check everything. And so I'm going to be going around the edge. I'm going to sew down this side. I'm going to stop at a 1/4 of an inch away from the end. I'm going to keep my needle down. I'm going to pivot I'll sew down the other side, then I'll pivot again and sew down this side. So let's go ahead and do that. And you're going to make sure that your fabric is up there underneath that little peek hole. I call it a peek hole. That's your needle position hole there in your foot. And I'm going to do a secure stitch here where you go forward 3/4 stitches, and I'm going to reverse 3/4 stitches, and I want to reinforce my stitch. Whoops, I was already in reverse. Go figure. And I'm going to go slow as I'm going through this, because I am going through a lot of layers. And in fact, let's see how I do. I should be fine, but you might want to change out to a denim needle. A denim 110, where you're going to be going through so many thicknesses, but I think I'll be fine. Now if I can get this going back in the right direction, we're just going to go slow. And I've got my folds there, so I want to be careful that my folds don't catch on my guide or on my foot as I'm going through. And I'm going to kind of hold it up here to the back. And I'm not pulling, but I'm just going to help keep things straight and keep it going through the machine. And I'm sticking. Did I tell it? Yeah, it's in. I'm just making sure I told my machine I'm in heavy. And I'm just going to go slow. Anytime I'm going through a lot of layers, I just take it easy. I don't want to cause my needle to break. And it just gives time for your machine to get through all those layers. And now I'm not in as many layers because I'm not on those folds, so I can go just a little bit faster. Stop when you're almost at 1/4 inch there. Check. And I'm just checking because I was wondering, why do I have this thread stuck out way to the back? But it looks like it caught up. Did it sew? It did. No, I'll just snip that off. Just double checking. Okay, so now we're going to go around this side. Got another thread poking out over here. My goodness. Okay, so now I'm going to go across until I'm at the 1/4 inch away from the bottom, or the corner. Almost there, not quite. Okay, and pivot, double check. And so as I go up this side, once again, I'm going to sew all the way till I get to the end, and I'm going to do a reinforced stitch. But as I go up this side, because I have that bulk from the folds and from the seam, I want to go just a little bit slower than I was going before, going across the straight edge. And we're almost done. And I'm going to go right to the edge, and then I'm going to reverse about 3-4 stitches so I can reinforce this, and then go forward into the end, and then cut my stitch, or my thread rather. Okay, so now we have that done. And I'm going to start from the bottom of this. I want to sew up through that middle once again, just so it's, because see, I have like a big opening. Now if you wanted, since we've already sewn that down through the center, and I had done that because I wanted to show you how you can fold it, and it, you know, you could have put elastic in and you could have made a little folder. You could, if you wanted, leave this completely open. And this would be a nice spot to maybe put coupons or, you know, some other things. You might have some papers that you need to take with you, you know, or something or other. But you could use this for a place for your coupons. That would be wonderful. But if you're wanting to have 4 card slots, I'm going to change out my foot. I need to go back to my straight stitch. And make sure that I'm in the 2.0. And I want nice secure stitches. And I'm just going to follow my previous sewing that I did. And I'm just going to reinforce this again, going in reverse 3-4 stitches, and then coming back up, because it doesn't hurt to reinforce it again. And I'm just going slow through here as well, because I got to go through those folds right up to the end, and then I'm going to reverse and then come forward and cut my thread. Trim my thread over here. I'm going to take my pins out so I can let my pocket back down where it belongs. My pins don't want to go into my pin cushion. My cat keeps stealing my pins out of my pin cushion. I don't know where she puts them. I need to remember to put that away. So now I have my pocket here. Now I could have used the same fabric as my lining. It's totally up to you. In my pocket yesterday I had used this fabric, and I just thought they went well together. It's really all in what you would like. If you want everything to match, if you like to have things a little bit different, trying to get this so that you can see everything. So that was my pocket from yesterday. If you haven't seen the tutorial, I really recommend that you do. We placed this an inch down. You could have put it down lower. You could have put this on the other side of the lining, however you would like it. This could match if you wanted this the same as that. If you're using a directional fabric for your lining and for this, make sure that you're cutting it so that it's, you know, going in the right direction, of course. But I just think it's cute to have it different colors. And so then your cards slip right in there. That one goes down a little bit lower than your others, which is fine, because if you were putting, you know, something in there that you don't want to fall out very easily, or if you were putting, you know, say some cash in there or whatever, it will go down a little bit deeper. One thing that you could do is you could have your card go the other way, possibly. But that's a little deeper than I was expecting it to be. As I was planning this out. So, I might have left that open and not sewn that seam. But if you have coupons, you could put some on this side, something different on that side. However you want it to go. But the cards do fit where the card slot is. I have to laugh at myself sometimes when I'm doing this stuff. Because I sat and I did all the math, figuring out how much I needed on each side and for my seams and everything. And I'm thinking, oh, that would make another little extra card slot there. So as you can see, and I'm not using anything, specific. I'm of course not going to put my credit cards in here on camera. But just some gift cards and whatnot is what I'm sticking in here. And as you can see, they fit in nice and snug. So they're not going to just fall out on you. If this was to tip upside down, they're not falling out on me. They're staying in there nice and snug. Which is important. I mean, you don't want it too loose. You want your cards to stay in. And they're staying in there really nice. And if I do this and shake it around, they're not falling out. So that's a good sign. And I've got my zipper right there, so if I wanted to put things in there, it's all good. However you would like to do it. So this could go into a purse. This could go into a tote bag. I've also done these on, sometimes I've made book covers for people to put their Bible in, to put books in that they take around with them and read. And I've put these on the inside of the book covers, the ones that zip up. And also I've made, trying to think, laptop bags for people that zip up. I've put these inside of there as well so that, with a handle on the laptop bag. And then they can stick their cards in there and it makes it a little bit easier. Sometimes we have business cards that we need to take around with us. That's really handy if you put this inside of one of those. I sometimes make covers for notepads and make a side where a notepad can slip down in. And I've put a card slot on the other side so that they could stick their business cards in there. There's quite a few uses for card slots and for zipper inserts. So I hope that this tutorial has helped you today. I hope that you'll find it handy to use in the future. And as you can see, my little corner up here isn't perfectly straight. It doesn't need to be. It's going to be on the inside of a bag. We don't have to worry about being absolute and totally 100% perfect. But it's useful. So if you've liked our tutorial, I hope that you'll stop and you'll click on the like, subscribe to Seaside Quilting Supplies, and also next to the subscribe button there's a little bell, and if you click on that bell you can change notifications to all, so whenever we have tutorials come up it will notify you and let you know that we have a new tutorial. Also, if you just want it to once in a while notify you and you don't want them all the time, it's already preset to that. So this has been a tutorial from Seaside Quilting Tutorials, and my name is Terry. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment and let me know, and I'll do my best to answer you. You have a great day. Happy sewing.